Hello, hello. Back again. I want to talk about interceptors a little bit. And not just grease interceptors. There's a lot of different kind of interceptors. I mean, most of the time it's going to be a grease interceptor. But we're going to talk about interceptors. Mifab. We are a stocking distributor for Mifab. So unless you got something weird and Mifab doesn't make it, sell that. These are our friends. We look after our friends. So I got a bunch of pages bookmarked here. Da, 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 da. So we're going to kind of just go through this catalog. If you don't have this catalog, get it. It's a good one. There's a lot of good information in here. The first one we're going to talk about is the Mini Max, the Mini-PL. So you're not going to see these all that often. These are a type of solid interceptor. There's kind of how it looks when it's installed. The primary application of this thing is if you're in a situation where you have like coffee grounds or like the remnants of tea making, that kind of thing. You might see something like this. All in this bag inside of here, that's a replaceable bag. It fills up over time, and that's kind of what the bag looks like once it's full. This is a very special type thing. You're not going to see it very often, but typically it's going to be a restaurant environment. This is when you're going to run across something like that. But figure I'd show you. Let's see. The Little Max. These are your compact, low-profile compact interceptors. The Little Max line goes from 7 to 50 gallons per minute. And talking about gallons per minute, when you're talking about ratings for these things, you need to know your GPM, and you need to know how many pounds of whatever matter it's supposed to hold, and you need to know, preferably you need to know your liquid capacity so you make a proper cross. But at the minimum, you have to know the GPM. That's something you must know. Okay. There's a low profile. They keep those. That's a 25 GPM. The GPM's usually in the part name. And they got a bunch of different ones here. But as far as different things you can intercept, grease, oil, so it can be an oil separator, big solids or solid interceptor, plaster, lint, sand, fish scales, which is kind of an odd one. I didn't even know that was a thing until recently. That's kind of cool. Rice, oil/sediment, fur. So these are all, some of these are really specialized, like, like a plaster one, in an industrial environment, like a manufacturing environment, you might see that. The oil and the solids, that's probably a little more common. Lint is actually fairly common, like an industrial laundromat or a laundromat where you'd find something like that, or maybe an apartment building that has a shared laundry setup. You'll see something like that. Fish scale, obviously that's food industry stuff. Same thing for the rice. And fur, like a pet daycare or a pet spa, that kind of deal. A place where pets get washed. You'll see something like that. But that just kind of gives you a general idea of what's around. And these are all let's see. That's just kind of a cross section of what they look like on the inside. Usually, and this part here is kind of, I think that's supposed to represent the back. No, it's the guides. That piece down there is kind of like a baffle. But the inside of these, what makes a grease interceptor versus an oil or versus a lint or whatever, just the way the baffles are designed. That's the only major difference. Otherwise, the stats are pretty much the same as far as the GPM, your pounds of whatever it is you're catching, and your gallon capacity. It's all going to be more or less the same. It's just the baffles will be different depending on what you're trying to catch with it. Here we go. We'll go ahead and go over that. So you got a little 7 all the way up to the little 50, and then you got the little 25 LP. That's the low profile. See, it shows a flow rate 7, 10, 15, 20, 25, 35, 50. The flow rate corresponds to your part number. And then your grease capacity in pounds. This is specifically to grease interceptors. Over here you're going to have For this is for oil interceptor, you're going to have your liquid capacity and your oil storage holding capacity in gallons. So these stats will be a little bit different depending on what you're actually holding, but the flow rate, look at that, still corresponds to your part number. So yeah, oops, got all out of whack there. So that shows you how many pounds, the pound capacity degrees. Sometimes you need to know that when you're crossing it. And it gives all the dimensions. And there's a whole bunch of different adders, suffixes. It can change the specs of it. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. Different part numbers for it, and all the list prices are listed. And then the oil interceptor, there's a solid interceptor. We're going to go ahead and skip ahead because they're, like I said, stat-wise, they're all fairly straightforward. All right. This section here, I just wanted to quickly go over that. These are the risers. They got that one over there for the little max. If at all possible, your customer wants to not use these because they're very expensive for what they are. But if they're in a situation where they need them, they gotta have them. So make it happen. But just be aware that these risers, they're proud of them. So don't be sticker shock. Ooh, there's a good picture of a typical install. Right there. Kind of shows you a plumbing diagram. It's vented right there. There's the interceptor and there's the sewer line going out. Kind of cool. So, Big Macs. Is that? Yeah, Big Macs. 50, 75, 100 gallons per minute. And these all come to the same types, grease, oil, plaster, lint. Decon tanks are a little bit different, but that's still an interceptor. Here's kind of a internal pic. Dang, I got some major glare going on here. That's kind of like an inside picture of it. It kind of shows you what's going on there. So as far as the grease interceptors on the big line, you got the big 500 to 750 and 1150. That's your gallon per minute, 50, 75, 100. Your pounds of grease capacity, liquid holding capacity. So the stats all line up basically the same way. And again, you've got tons of different options, different suffixes you can add to it. And there's the big O for big oil, plaster. I'm going to skip ahead some more. Risers for the big, okay? So they make a riser for it. They'll custom cut you one, but again, they are really proud of them. If you need a riser, what I would suggest doing, especially if it's a customer that puts a fair number of these in, sell them a piece of 18-inch corrugated double wall, because it's literally the same thing. For the price of one of these, like say a 4-foot riser, for the price that Mifab wants for that, they could get a whole 20-foot stick of double wall 18-inch corrugated and probably still come out cheaper, and they'll have some for next time. So I highly encourage you to push that. Say, hey, you can get this, and it's exactly what you need, but I can sell you this whole 20-foot stick, and you just cut it yourself for basically the same money, and you'll have one for next time. So, yeah. I mean, it's neat that they do it that way, though. I like that, but again, it's much cheaper you're better off just doing a whole 20-foot stick and letting them cut it themselves. That way they can get the exact length they need, and then they'll have some left over for next time. Is there anything on here I want to do? I mean, they got alarm systems, I think, but whatever. There's a couple of diagrams, so you can actually, if you have an engineered interceptor system, sometimes you might have more than one interceptor in the system. So that's kind of a couple examples of how that goes together. Supermax. These are the big ones, okay? These are the biggest ones they make. They got 500, what is that? The Super 500, the Super 750, the 1000, 1250, 1300, 1500, and the biggest of the big, the 2000. And again, for the most part, they come in the same varieties as the other ones. These are more specific to grease, oil, and solids, though. That's kind of what the inside of one of those looks like. And it uses the same 18-inch corrugated risers as the Big Macs. And this is a Super 50. Kind of show you here. Liquid holding capacity, the grease retention capacity, almost 3,500 pounds. That's a lot of grease. 250 gallon per minute flow rate for the standard model. So you can put a lot of dang grease in that thing. And that's the smallest one they make in this line. They get much bigger. I mean, the Super 2000 can hold 13,000 pounds of grease. That's a lot of grease. That's probably 3 or 4 pump trucks worth. That's a huge amount of grease. So that's kind of cool. Decon. I'm not going to go over the decon. It's oil interceptors. So that picture's gross, but what this is a heat trace for a grease trap. Mifab does sell this. Basically what it is a piece of insulation with a couple wires run through it. What is the part number on that? I don't see it on the book, but I'm just kind of scanning through. But the whole purpose of a heat trace on a grease interceptor line is so you don't end up with that. Because if for some reason you've got to mount, like say your grease interceptor is mounted remotely, like I say it's far away from the fixture, if the grease cools off before it gets there, it's going to solidify in the line. So you want to keep it warm. That's all that does. That way the grease stays liquid. That way it can actually make it to the interceptor, and that's where it will stay. It's an acid neutralization tank. They make a whole bunch of different sizes and different specs. That's kind of what one looks like there, or that style right there. In industrial situations where chemicals are involved, you'll see this kind of stuff. It's not particularly common, but you stay in the game long enough, you might run across somebody needing one. Let's see. And this last little thing I'm going to go over in the catalog is a cross-reference book. This is a really good cross-reference book, or cross-reference like section. This is way easier than going on the website. There are very few things they don't make. They have a cross for just about everything that I'm aware of. I think I've only run across maybe one situation where they didn't have a direct cross. But yeah, that's fairly well covers it. There's not really much more I have to say about it. This is one of those things where if you study them and learn about them, they're pretty interesting, and there's really not much to them, honestly. But if you ever have any questions or need advice, let me know.